Hi, afternoon everyone. It's Rachel Spratling from Chalk Hill Blue, and I'm here this afternoon with Jane Fryatt from Face to Face HR. One of the things that Jane and I often chat about is taking on your first employee. It's often a hot topic of conversation. Jane, I know it's something that you're particularly passionate about. Why is that?
I think it's just such an exciting time for a business, isn't it? They've reached that milestone where they feel stable enough to take on another wage. But it's also quite like a scary time. They're suddenly sharing their business with somebody else. They're having to think of work that person should do. And obviously, they're having to bear the cost. Will they find enough each month to pay them? Will that person misbehave? Will they kind of upset their clients? All of those things. So it's a great kind of opening relationship for me with a client, is talking about them taking on their first employee. And actually, often people come to me saying, I don't know what to do. I feel confused. Like, a lot of the documentation is quite confusing and it seems quite complicated and quite risky. So having someone to kind of walk them through all of that is quite satisfying, because you can see like the relief. It's just like, has someone else is going to help me to do that. I think actually one of the hardest things for the business owner is actually deciding when is the right time to take on their first employee. When should they do that? What should they have ready? What do you think about that?
It's a conversation that I have often with clients, actually. And for me, I always get clients to think about the value of their time. And I think there's a piece around thinking, what should the business owner be investing their time and energy in? And if you put a value against that, how many pounds per hour should the business owner be focusing on, their business development, winning new clients, driving the business forward? And if a business owner can be making hundreds of pounds per hour doing things like that, rather than doing things that he might be able to take an employee on that they're paying 15 or 20 pounds an hour. For me, it then becomes a no-brainer that actually it frees you up to do the business owner tasks that you need to be doing. And then you start to put the tasks, of some of those more administrative things, or some of the more basic parts of your business at the right level. And it should always then be profitable, if you think about that, because you're always having more hours to do, more things in the business. So it's a mathematical piece for me always.
And just being really clear, what should I be doing rather than what I think, I must do for my clients. It's quite hard to break it down sometimes.
Oh, definitely. So from your perspective, Jane, what do you think people should consider when they're taking on their first employee?
Well, I think it's really important to know and be clear about what is your employee actually going to do. I write a job description, and maybe it just maybe you just write a list to begin with, just everything that you think what they could do, and that can be turned into a job description relatively easily. So quite often job descriptions, people might look on Indeed or somewhere and think, oh, that sounds about right. I'll go with that, copying someone else's job description, for example. But if you're not really, really clear about what your expectations are, things can very quickly go wrong. So, no employee is a mind reader. So being really clear about what their objectives are, what they're there to do, what their contribution is, what the hours you need them to do. If they're working from home, especially, then that's really, really important. So I'd encourage anyone to write a list of stuff that this person's going to do. And then there are a few practicalities, just making sure you've registered for PAYE and set up a payroll so you're able to pay them. Make sure you've got your employer's liability insurance. Sometimes we forget, actually, that is a mandatory requirement. And identify things like what pension you're going to offer them. Do you want to enhance any of the kind of statutory terms and conditions, like holiday? What are you going to offer them in terms of a package? There is actually a really handy flowchart on .gov.uk, so have a look at that. Okay, and then lastly, the really important thing is to protect your business by a really good employment contract. And there are a few other requirements around documents that you need to have in place once you employ. But the employment contract, again, it's very easy to kind of take one from like where you worked before or a friend, but actually there is benefit in having a bespoke contract for your business to protect the things that you really value, and write it in the tone of voice that you want to project, from your business. So these documents are the first experience the employee has of you and your business. So it's quite important.
They don't have to be too formal and scary, do they? They can, as you say, be written in a very human way.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually it doesn't need to be legal to provide great protection, legal language, I mean, they don't have to be, all these kind of terminologies that people don't really understand. An employment contract is there, even in a verbal form, so writing it down is you're just being really clear with your employee what your expectations are.
Yeah, no, good call. And what do you see often as the sort of common mistakes that business owners make when taking on their first employee?
Yeah, absolutely. And sadly, we often don't employ the right person straight away. And that's usually because we've employed a friend or a family member. And again, we haven't been really clear about expectations. So we've relied on our kind of prior knowledge of that person and, they're a good guy sort of thing. And then suddenly things can go wrong. And so I would say there's absolutely nothing wrong with going into business with your family, and plenty of people do, but just don't treat them any differently from the point of view of having clear expectations, having an employment contract, setting out what you expect them to do in terms of their objectives. Just, be really clear. The other thing that people are obviously always worried about is my employee going to misbehave? Will they turn up late every day? Will they tell me they're pregnant 2 months after they've joined? All of these kind of things are concerns. And actually, I would say don't let any of those worries stop you from employing someone, because they're all dealable with, if you know what I mean. We can address all of those things as long as you've got the right things in place beforehand. So yeah, mistakes are common. We probably won't get it right first time, but if you do some of the things we said, like write a clear job description, go through a proper recruitment process, have a good contract of employment, then you're going to be able to be okay.
No, I agree. And again, in your experience, what sort of help is available for people who are thinking of taking on their first employee?
Well, there are quite a few grants at the moment, because obviously the government's trying to stimulate jobs. So under Rishi Shah's, the Chancellor's schemes, there are a number of grants available. So the first one is the Kickstart scheme. So you can take on a 16 to 24-year-old, and the government will pay 6 months of the national minimum wage for up to 25 hours a week. So it's definitely worth looking at that. Some small employers, very small employers taking on their first employee have been turned down. I think they do want to see that there is an established business there, but it's just still worth applying. It's very easy to apply online, or you can go through an intermediary. The other one is apprenticeships. Obviously, you've got apprentices in your business, Rachel, haven't you, who are doing really, really well? Yeah, fantastic. So again, lots of funding available for that, depending on the age of the apprentice, but you can get 3K grant for an apprentice at the moment, plus another £1,000 if they're between 16 and 18. So definitely worth looking at apprenticeships, and actually a great way of growing your own talent in your business. Obviously there's help available out there from a recruitment perspective, so lots of tools to help you recruit effectively, job boards, recruitment agencies usually really happy to talk to you about your vacancy, look at your job description, that sort of thing. I'm certainly really happy to help with job descriptions and being really clear what people are looking for in terms of skill set, not just the skill set, obviously the attitude's really, really important, especially when you're bringing on kind of like a junior member of staff. Do they fit your values, that sort of thing. And then I offer a first employee package, which gives you everything you need to take on your first employee from a kind of legal point of view, and a manager's guide, handy manager's guide that tells that you sort of all the requirements that we've briefly spoken about today. So lots of help available.
No, lots of help available. And I think the summary that I take from this is it shouldn't be scary. As you said, it's a really exciting time, and there is lots of help available. If people want to get in contact with you, Jane, details are available underneath